All right, ready for a deep dive. Today we're diving headfirst into Iran's military, their history, their capabilities, all of it. We're not just checking boxes here, though. We're after those real aha moments, those little-known facts about Iran's armed forces.
And there are plenty of those, believe me. For starters, Iran's military structure. It's anything but ordinary.
Really? How so? We've got excerpts from Wikipedia about the Islamic Republic of Iran armed forces to guide us, Rye. What makes them stand out?
Well, unlike most countries with one unified military, Iran has two distinct branches. There's the Artesh, which is their regular army.
Okay, the standard military force.
Right. But then you have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC for short. It's like having a whole second military, and they answer to a completely different chain of command.
Two branches, different priorities, maybe even competing agendas. I'm starting to see why you said unusual. Tell me more. Where did this two-pronged system come from?
It all goes back to the revolution in 1979. See, the Artesh represents that more traditional military, focused on conventional warfare. But the IRGC, that was created specifically after the revolution to protect the Islamic Republic itself. It's about safeguarding their ideology, their entire system.
So they're not just soldiers, they're guardians, protectors of the revolution itself. I can only imagine that adds a whole other layer to their military strategy.
Absolutely. The Artesh is focused outward, defending the nation in a traditional sense. But the IRGC is deeply intertwined with Iran's political core. They answer directly to the supreme leader, which gives them significant power, even within the government itself.
That's a level of influence most militaries don't have.
Exactly. And it's essential for understanding how Iran exerts its power, both domestically and internationally. This goes way beyond just military strength. It's about projecting their worldview, their ideology.
Speaking of strength, I read that Iran has one of, if not the largest active militaries in the Middle East. That's why. Over 500,000 soldiers. But nowadays, it's not just about sheer numbers. What about their tech? Can they actually back up all that manpower with firepower? That's the big question, right? Your largest militaries, and you can't help but wonder what they're packing.
And that's where Iran's story gets really interesting. Decades of sanctions, mainly from the U.S., have made it really tough for them to get their hands on, well, cutting-edge military technology.
Right, so how do you equip an army that big? Are we talking outdated equipment, or is there more to it?
It's a little more complicated than that. Picture this. You've got fighter jets, you've got tanks, but they're all from the 70s. And to top it off, no spare parts, no outside help. That's the reality for Iran. They've had to become masters of, let's say, resourcefulness, reverse engineering, finding their own solutions, the whole nine yards.
Wow, talk about making do. I can see how that would push a country to become self-reliant, but how far are we talking here?
We're talking about a full-blown domestic arms industry, and I don't just mean keeping the lights on. They're producing their own tanks, their own submarines, missiles even. Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Right.
They've had to become incredibly self-sufficient.
Okay, so they're building their own stuff, but are we talking about pale imitations? Or have they actually managed to innovate despite these limitations?
That's the fascinating part. Look at their missile program, for instance. They've developed some pretty sophisticated ballistic and cruise missiles, and with ranges that have definitely raised eyebrows, not just regionally, but globally. These aren't just for show. They pose a real threat.
I can see why those missiles would turn heads. I remember reading about them. It was big news. But when it comes to Iran's military, the conversation always seems to lead back to drones. What's the deal with their drone program? What makes it so special?
It's not all hype. Their drone program has really changed the game. Iran has poured resources into developing a whole range of unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs as they're called. Everything from those simple surveillance drones to ones that can, pack a punch.
So more than just spying, these drones can actually deliver a serious blow.
Oh, absolutely. And the real kicker, cost effectiveness. Drones are way cheaper to produce and operate compared to traditional fighter jets, and they've proven themselves very effective in recent conflicts.
You say effective, are we talking about a shift in how warfare is conducted in the region? Got an example for me?
Well, look at the Shahed 136 drone. Relatively cheap to build, but with a range that lets it strike deep into enemy territory. This has really shaken things up, especially in places like Ukraine, and it's forced countries to rethink their entire air defense strategies.
A low-cost weapon that can disrupt traditional military thinking. That's a potent combination. And to think, that's just one example. It really makes you reconsider the whole picture of Iran's military capabilities. We talked a lot about Iran's military capabilities, the drones, the missiles. It begs the question, how are they actually using all this military might? The Wikipedia article mentions this idea that Iran hasn't actually started a war, officially, in modern history. Something about a no first strike policy. Does that really line up with everything else we've been discussing?
It's a great point, and it speaks to Iran's strategic thinking. They may not be launching full-on invasions, but they've definitely mastered what you'd call asymmetric warfare. Think of it as leveling the playing field, finding ways to counter a stronger opponent by choosing where and how they'll engage. They're playing different games.
Okay, so less head-to-head, more about exploiting weaknesses, hitting them where it hurts. What does that look like on the ground?
Think about their support for groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon or various factions in Iraq and Syria. These become extensions of Iranian influence, allowing them to project power and pursue their goals, but without, say, directly confronting the U.S. or Israel.
So it's a leverage game. And I'm guessing those drones and missiles factor into this. Not about conventional war, but targeted strikes, keeping everyone on edge.
Precisely. Remember a few years back, those incidents with Iranian boats, small boats, harassing those massive U.S. Navy vessels in the Strait of Hormuz? Classic asymmetric tactics. It's about demonstrating that they have options, that they can disrupt something as vital as the flow of oil if they choose.
A bold statement, for sure. Especially with how much the world relies on energy from that region. It's a reminder that military power isn't just about brute force.
It's about strategy, resourcefulness, using every tool in the box.
And increasingly, it seems like one of those tools is cyber warfare. Our source claims Iran is a major player in that realm, maybe even top 5 globally. And they haven't just been building up their cyber forces, right? They've been putting them to use.
Exactly. We've seen reports linking Iran to all sorts of cyber attacks, targeting financial institutions in the U.S., even attempts to disrupt critical infrastructure, like in Saudi Arabia, allegedly. The trouble is, this digital battleground is shrouded in secrecy. Pinning down the culprit, proving it was them, is a whole other challenge.
So you've got this domain where a lot happens under the radar, where it's hard to point fingers, but the potential for disruption is enormous.
Exactly. And with tensions already running high in the region, it definitely adds another layer of complexity. It underscores how much the nature of conflict has changed. Military strength now isn't just about what you can destroy physically. It's about what you can disrupt digitally, what you can influence and control in the online world.
So if we connect all the dots, it seems like Iran has managed to build a pretty formidable position on the world stage, despite decades of pressure and sanctions. It really speaks to their adaptability, their knack for strategy, how they've adjusted to this new era of warfare.
It does, and it makes you wonder, as Iran continues to develop its military, both conventionally and in these asymmetrical ways, how will that impact the balance of power in the Middle East, even globally? It's a question without easy answers, for sure.
Definitely something to keep in mind as we try to make sense of these complex geopolitical issues. On that note, we'll have to wrap up this deep dive for today. But hey, keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and we'll be back again soon with another fascinating look into a new corner of the world.